Welcome to Biblio Cultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and literature. In this episode, I'm going to go through the Monas Hieroglyphica from John Dee. But before we begin, please remember to subscribe to the channel if you like the content. Click the bell for notifications, comment on the video, like the video, and share the video if you have people that you think would like my content. So first, I have a lot of books on Hermeticism and occultism. I have a pretty large collection on the topic. This one is actually a pretty new edition, but it is a classic that I already possess in a different edition. But I want to present this edition because I really do think it's a very good, high quality one. And I do think that they've done a really good job restoring the text. First, before we go into the content, the edition is from Ouroboros Press, and it's a 2021 hardcover edition. It's not the fancy leather edition or gilded edition or anything like this. It is just a very good, high quality hardcover, and Ouroboros Press is actually very good at putting together classic works on philosophy and occultism, and they do a very good job on it. So I highly suggest, if you can find this book, same edition, paperback, like I always say, it doesn't matter as much as long as you can imbibe the content and the message in the book. That's what really matters. But do check out their website. And I'm not being sponsored by them. I just really appreciate their work as publishers. So the Monas Hieroglyphica by John Dee, who is a famous 16th century magician, philosopher, thinker. He wrote a book on the topic of symbol, and he decided he wanted to generate a symbol that would represent his entire philosophy and would actually represent entire existence. So the ambition of the book is very powerful. It's very bold, because his attempt is to conglomerate all the knowledge of mathematics and philosophy and theology into a single symbol. The very idea of it is quite spectacular. Now, what he does is he combines Platonism and Kabbalah and Greek geometry and obviously Christianity and Hermeticism, and he merges them in a very particular way. John Dee is known for this, and I would call it Christian Hermeticism because that's what it is. It's not a so-called pagan form of Hermeticism. It is very Christian, and it has the Christian apocalyptic influence in it. And this is a good example of what I've mentioned in a prior video, in which Christianity and the classic culture of the West, which was what people would call pagan, merged in a very particular way, generating a lot of art and a lot of literature and a lot of philosophy and a lot of magical works. Most works that people today call occultic are technically Christian books. As a matter of fact, I find it hard to find a book that is not really Christian in some way or the other that are considered to be classics of occultism. And that includes books on alchemy. This book obviously it's an alchemical work, but alchemy obviously in the esoteric sense. There is an element of alchemy which is purely chemical, purely scientific. And although for our generations and our current time, their science seems to be weak in some way or not fully developed, at least from our perspective of the way we see it. So a lot of alchemical works, they are simply works on chemistry. And with time, people started to interpret a lot of them with a higher esoteric sense. Now, of course, some works, it could be argued, also had a double meaning, a triple meaning, of course. But we must not forget that a lot of these alchemists were just chemists. What he does here is that he does go straight into the alchemical kind of interpretation of Christianity, which involved also politics, because he believed in the development of Christian republics that had enlightened philosopher-kings. A pretty standard common view at the time, but his view is a little different because almost all thinkers, all theologians and saints of the Western Church, and even the Eastern, but in this case we're talking about the Western, believed that their kings should be saintly and that the state should be ruled by enlightened monarchs, or at least enlightened leadership, because you have Venice or republics, but they're autocratic. But they still believe they should be ruled by philosophers and enlightened thinkers. So that was his point of view. And a lot of his works are kind of directed in creating an all-encompassing worldview that involves philosophy and alchemy, etc. One point that I found very interesting, and it was actually primarily in the notes. So the notes in this book are spectacular, so I suggest don't skip the notes. I mean, I guess some people do that, but no, read every note in books. It's always important. In most cases, a lot of times there's just references. If they're just referencing another book, they're fine, but notes are important. So it goes into John Dee's way of looking at the sign that was placed on top of Jesus Christ's cross. So if you know, it's INRI, INRI, Jesus Nazarenus Rex Iudeorum, which means Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Judeans, sometimes translated as King of the Jews. There's some controversy on whether it's Judeans or Jews, but that's a different topic. He interprets INRI in a different way, Igne Natura Renovator Integrum, which means through the fire, nature is reborn whole. So the interpretation of Christ on the cross as an alchemical symbol, most alchemical books use the cross as a symbol, obviously, but the interpretation of the crucifixion as an alchemical process of fire through which one has to pass, an initiation mystery. I've always found that concept to be very, very interesting, and it gives a twist to, again, when most occultists think of Christianity, they're constantly critiquing and attacking it. But I think it's primarily because they don't have a lot of knowledge on all the particularities and very weird ways of interpreting a lot of these things. And they're not that weird, because if you look at the Christus Victor concept of the Eastern Church, it has a little bit of this notion that Christ is basically a gateway through which all humans have to go through so they can become deified, which means theosis, becoming like unto God. Most people hear that and would sound like occultism, but it's actually traditional Christianity has this notion. That doesn't mean you become the God, but you become a God, and that itself is very different than what most people think. The other conception that I found very cool that it was mentioned there is the mystagogus. And I'm probably mispronouncing that, but mystagogus is the priest who initiates into the secret mysteries. And John Dee liked to see or visualized the Christian priest himself almost like an illusion mystery priest that was initiating people into a type of Christian mystery religion. Again, not that far-fetched, because the entire structure of the traditional church had a process of initiation. It still does to this day. if it's a traditional Christian church, Orthodox, even traditional Catholic, in which you have to go through certain mysteries, and they call them mysteries, and the sacraments, and you're basically being initiated. Here, John Dee, what he does, he goes a little bit deeper into the Hermetic conception of this. Another point that I thought is worth mentioning is that he saw God as a demiurge. He uses the term demiurge, but he uses it as a positive, not a negative. So in Gnosticism, or which we'll call Christian Gnosticism as we know it, saw the demiurge as a negative being. The God of the Old Testament as being some kind of a demon who is destructive and is enslaving people on earth, that kind of thing. And you have to be liberated from him. And Jesus is seen as the serpent of paradise who comes here to save mankind from the demiurge. But for John Dee, the demiurge is interpreted in a positive way, which is obviously the same way that traditional Christians saw it. When they criticize Gnostics, they believe that their hatred of existence or their disdain for material life was perverse, which is interesting because modern Satanists and occultists, they tend to be life-affirming and dislike religions that are life-denying. But Gnosticism is very influential in occultism, and Gnosticism is actually life-denying. Whereas the critique of Gnosticism by Christians is about life affirmation. So it's kind of weird. And I'm simplifying here because obviously there's a lot of life-denying conceptions in Christianity that you could argue. But what I'm saying is that it is fascinating to see the strange dialectic that is usually promoted as if it's a very clear-cut line between life-denying and life-affirming, between the Abrahamic religions and non-Abrahamic religions. But the truth is there's a lot of gray areas there, and I would say very deep gray areas. John Dee is a great example, and most of these old occultists are a great example of these areas that you cannot pigeonhole them in any location like that. And they were Christians. At least they saw themselves as Christians, and they were still occultists. So, and finally, the symbol as a portal. So, because obviously the magnus opus of John Dee is the symbol, to get to the symbol that represents all reality. And of course, I don't want to give a lot of details on it because that's the whole point of reading the book. But just achieving this notion in his explication of why this symbol represents everything and everything comes together throughout the book is definitely a classic that you must have in your bookshelf and you should study. So hopefully you like this kind of short, presentation of the book. Again, I try my best to present books without really giving out too much of them. So it's usually my impressions of the book, the feelings of the book, the philosophical ideas of the book. And through this presentation, the objective is for you to say, you know what, I want to read that book because it seems to address something that I care about or that I think it's interesting. So hopefully you like the video. Remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, share the video, like the video, and comment on the video. And I'll do my best to read those comments and we can have a discussion there if you wish. So thank you for being with me. See you next time.